Evening all, welcome to Kicking Dust. So, new favourite map alert. I love this map. I want to have this map's children. I want to settle down in a very meaningful relationship that eventually turns into a very loveless marriage, and eventually we divorce and I go off with, I don't know, Manners Peak. Anyway, so basically, I love this map. Post in the comments what this map is called because I wish to woo it. It is fantastic. And I think certainly a lot of the new maps coming through are absolutely brilliant. Basically, I think at the moment the game is certainly coming along really well. In fact, I'm actually going to make quite a sweeping statement that I think the game is as good as it ever has been. And let me explain that. The frustrations that came about with 1.4 were pretty much driven from the fact that the game was moving from night to day, or however you want to call it. But I think as it stands at the moment, the game is feeling incredibly good, and I do mean incredibly good. You know, I really do hope that this game continues to grow in this fashion, because as a big player of things like Planetary 2 and, you know, Battlefield 3 and other things, this game is really up there now, and I know a lot of people love to snort derision at that statement, but it's true. This game, and I think, you know, I do stand by this, has the future that I think those other games don't. And let me explain why. There is an emergent, or it's either an emergent strategy or it's been a calculated strategy, but either way, either somebody at CCP has been brilliant or lucky or both, because the equation that Dust has, I think, is going to be copied and used in the future. So Dust, I think, is setting a bit of a precedent for the future in these three areas. The first is the economy. The economy is a massive differentiator from other games. You play COD, you die 20 times, it doesn't mean anything. Your KD ratio is all that matters. In Dust, your KD ratio doesn't matter because obviously there is a much larger picture involved. Your test and your kind of measure of worth is your wallet. How good a merc you are is how rich you are, pretty much. And I think that's a fantastic thing, because with this new, you know, even with things like aim assist, which I think is actually working really well now, there is now this fear of gung-hoing it, because if you die, then you start to lose air skin, etc. And it's not like the previous days of before where, you know, I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say the game was broken, because the reality is that you know, being able to run and gun and jump up and down with a flaylock and a scout suit and completely evade everybody and have them shoot, you know, endless rounds at you and miss was stupid. Today's system, where everybody is able to be hit in some form or another, is incredibly good. Now, it means that obviously I don't get the same kind of play style that I liked before, but what it does mean is that everything is now incredibly tactical. You can have the best suit in the world, but the reality is that 2 or 3 people, if they get a bead on you, will kill you. And that is brilliant. That is exactly what the game needed. So having that frailty or that vulnerability in the game inherent, I think, has created longer games, more tactical games, and it's made it a much more enjoyable process to play this game. And I think that's point one. Point two is the fitting system. So I'm running obviously an armor and shield tank suit, just as an example. Now, the thing is, most games, I think, will look at this fitting system and they will try and rip it off, because the reality is that not only can you be a good player and own and dominate and whatever, but you actually now have this other degree, which is how good a fitter you are, so how clever you are with fittings. And I think this is something that other games are looking at probably with extreme interest, because I think Battlefield 3 and Call of Duty and, you know, PlanetSide 2 and all these things, they have something similar, but in no way is it as flexible and as central to the control and ability to own in the game as it is in Dust. So I think that's an absolutely critical one, and I wouldn't underestimate that, because I certainly feel that you can have a suit that completely, you know, is fit very cleverly and it will own, and you'll be able to do a certain role with it more so than any other specific role would. So this is why I think it's you know, an absolute, you know, masterpiece in essence of how it works. The third point I would say is the mechanics, or the general feel, the lemon juice of the I don't know what I'm talking about, but basically it's that kind of feeling of the game as it stands. And I'll probably go into this in more depth in another video. I'm working on one at the moment, in fact, which I think looks at certainly the mechanics of the game when compared to other games. And I would say that Dust is way up there, because again, the feeling within the control and the running around is very good. Now, I don't know how. Maybe this is a PS3 thing, but any shooter you play nowadays does have an incredible sort of lightness to it. You know, most games, they feel light. Most games developers, I don't think, really understand the concept of gravity or weight or severity, let's say, because when you call a tank in dust, it feels like a really heavy piece of metal. It feels like a proper tank. Whereas I think a lot of the current kind of engines, I think they kind of just lighten everything. So you're able to run really fast and jump really fast and far, and all of these things, they just make it feel as if it's you're very aware you're playing a game is actually the difference that I would cite, because the reality is when you play Dust, you do slightly get immersed into it more so. Well, I certainly do more so than any other game. And I think my kind of feeling is that this is only going to get better, because again, when you fire the guns and when you sort of fly a dropship or when you drive a tank, whatever, there is this feeling that there is weight to everything. Anyway, we'll cover that topic another time. I've got a whole video on that, because it's a big bugbear of mine, and it's certainly an issue I have with PlanetSide 2 and other games, that they feel you're very aware you're playing a game, and obviously that's a bit of a bad thing, because you do lose that complete immersion in the game. So I would have to say 1.4 is certainly one of the best ones out there. Now, there's been a few questions asked in the previous video, so I thought I'd just spend the remaining time covering them. Somebody asked me why corporation tax is important and why also do I think it should be low, which is a great question, and let me just explain why. In EVE, they have had corporation tax since the year dot, pretty much, and corporation tax, and I ran a corporation, I still run a corporation, I run, I think I'm running the Alliance, technically not anyway. The corporation tax has always been very important, because there are bills to pay in EVE, and we have an Alliance, for example, Dark Star Army, and that is costing many hundreds of millions of ISK every quarter or whatever it may be to keep that alliance going. And this is something to really bear in mind, because corporation tax is a passive income for the corporation to use. But that is also why it should be low. I have a major issue with people who have their fingers in the till, and this is a problem with a lot of EVE corporations. There is a lack of, say, maturity when it comes to administering funds. And unfortunately, this passes over into real life as well, where you have any form of taxation or any form of, I guess, systematic fund, or revenue collection, there is always corruption inherent. And the problem is I think, particularly in Dust, is a lot of directors and CEOs have got this kind of collective opinion that our member base are now funding us to use enforcer tanks every round, or our member base are paying for us to use prototype every round. And that I have a major issue with. In Dark Star Army, we do not do that. Other than Lord Porter taking a few ISK here and there to buy a tank, which I'm going to kick him in the balls because I'll give him the ISK from my own wallet to do that. I'm joking, by the way, dude. But basically, we do need to obviously ring fence those funds, because they are there pretty much for the rainy days of whatever the future may bring, which could be, planetary conquest. It could be, a completely different mechanic that comes in that maybe means that to interact with EVE you need ISK. So ISK, you need to think of it not as money, you need to think of it as a very valuable resource that is important to collect in a very structured way. So this is why corporation tax is important. But on the other hand, no corporation tax should be above 10% in my opinion, because you're just basically milking your member base too much for the benefit of a few. And I think any corporation that literally does have over 10, maybe 15 is kind of acceptable, but any corporation that has over 10, let's say, is basically just doing it so that they can get a great big wodge of money that their directors and CEO can then use to benefit themselves. Now, again, some people will always say, oh no, we're doing it because this gives us a war fund or whatever it may be, and that's fine, but generally a lot of people fleece the shit out of the system. So just be a little bit aware of that. The second point is a touchy one that we are going to do a video on eventually, is forge guns. I'm getting quite a lot of mail from people saying do a video on forge guns and get them nerfed, thanks in advance. And it's like, okay, well, what's the story then? So I like the forge gun, I use it a lot, and to be honest, it's the one thing that I have to stop proto tankers wiping me out, because my prototype forge gun is there to stop you know, any Tom, Dick and Harry getting in a really good tank and basically wiping the floor with the whole round. Because, you know, one person in a tank can ruin the fun of 32 people. Let's not forget that. Or 31 people, rather. So, you know, I have an issue that obviously tanks shouldn't be invulnerable. I actually think they should be maybe a bit more involved. So maybe you can disable a tank. So while it's not as potent as it could be, you could maybe take its tracks out, or maybe you could take its turret out, so it needs to go repair. Or I think ammo will be a big deal here, because hopefully ammo is going to stop a lot of the nonsense that seems to be going on. But having said that, I think maybe they are a bit too easy to kill as well. So I would just give a warning with this. If you start to change and imbalance this picture either left or right, so the forge gun gets nerfed, or the forge gun gets buffed, or the tank gets buffed, or the tank gets nerfed, you're going to change the game massively. Because if we go back to the days of old when somebody would call in a Madruga, it would be incredibly well fit and it would wipe the floor with the whole level. That is a time we don't want to go back to. I would say at the moment the infantry game in this game is exceptional. Let's not ruin it by making tanks OP. However, I do admit that tanks maybe need some love. Now, this is my opinion. Already CCP are doing a huge amount on this, and 1.5 is going to bring a huge amount of upgrades and updates to tanks and vehicles, so I am told. So stay tuned for that. But we'll do a video on this and we'll talk about it more. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.